Okay, hey everybody, welcome back to Mind Shifting Monday with Mitch. My name is Mitch Weisberg, and I'm your host. And today I'm with the incomparable Josh Chernikov, and we're actually not angry at each other. Well, maybe we are, but as far as I know, we're not angry at each other. But we're going to be talking about why so many people in and around schools are so angry. uh, the premise is that our whole school ecosystem is really boiling over. And today we're going to be looking at five complex issues that are dividing educators, principals, district administrators, parents, politicians, and students. And instead of just looking at this problem, we're going to talk about the mind shifting framework and how to figure out how to move forward. So, Josh, how are you doing?
Angry at you,
Oh no, not again.
very angry. No,
So what did I do this
just
time?
nothing, nothing.
Okay.
You got two people though who were discussing this topic around why people around schools are so angry, and we're probably two of the least angry people on the face of this earth. Um, so interesting people to have this discussion. But I'm game.
Okay. Well, we're around people, and I mean, you have a daughter going into school, and you deal with, I guess, entrepreneurs who are working with the school system. I'm working with teachers, para educators, principals, superintendents, all the time who are dealing with each other, who are dealing with the parents, who are dealing with the kids and all the issues. Um and it's just, like, you feel so bad because school should be a place where we're preparing the next generation how to live great lives, right? That's the whole purpose of it, is prepare them to be workers, to prepare them to be citizens, to prepare them to have their own families, prepare them to enjoy their lives. And yet we're fighting about so many issues.
Yeah, I mean, we are qualified to have the conversation. We just happen to be two pretty mild mannered people. However, um, I
Of
do.
course, our wives do know
Yeah,
how to trigger us, right?
that is very true. I knew something like that was
Right.
around the corner there. Or, I've heard from my wife now and then. Could you show a little bit of emotion? Is that possible? So,
Uh-huh.
but we won't go. That's it's not about us. Um, One of the places that I thought would be interesting to start with, because we do have an 11-year-old, so she is in the classroom, is that classrooms do feel at times disrupted,
Hmm.
uh, and that's got to impact teachers. That's got to impact principals, and I know it impacts us as parents. Um, so, what's your take on student behavioral issues?
So, when you look at the causes of student behavior issues, I think two causes really stand out. I mean, first of all, you got teachers managing 20, 30 kids, but these kids ha- they've all been disrupted from the pandemic, from COVID. So they've missed out on a crucial social growth, whatever stage it was. If they're just going into kindergarten now, they missed their first few years. If they're going to third and fourth grade, their preschool and kindergarten years were messed up. If they're going to middle school, their elementary school is messed up. So we're seeing kids who were a vital part of their social, uh, emotional learning, where they would be interacting with kids, they'd be learning appropriate behaviors.
Mm.
They were stuck at home with their parents, or and without interacting with other kids. So I think that's a huge part of it. And then we see much more mainstreaming now, and data shows that really one out of every six or seven kids has gone through trauma in their life. And so you have a
Wow.
class of 30 kids, and you've got six or seven kids in that just looking at the numbers, 6 or 7 kids who the slightest thing can set them off, and the teachers are being told basically, well, manage it, right? And it's really hard.
One of the ways to manage it, I would imagine, is mind shifting. And so if if you're a teacher, if you're a principal and you're facing some of these challenges, disruption and could be carryover from the
Hmm.
pandemic, how does mind shifting flow into that?
Yeah, and I'd like to also say that people who are listening, if you have ideas or if you have questions in this area that you'd like us to bring up, just please put them in the chat, and we'll work them into the conversation. So if you've found also that if you're a parent and your child is going through this, or you're a teacher and you're dealing with this in the classroom, or your principal or superintendent, put your thoughts into the chat. I when I look at a lot of these issues, it's I think the first step is really understanding what's going on in the brain when a person is triggered. So when you have it, say, an overwhelmed teacher or a parent who gets triggered, what's happening is their fast, automatic, reactive brain is taking over the wheel. It's their
Hmm.
survival brain, and once that survival brain is in charge, the slower, curious, empathetic, thinking brain, the part that listens and problem solves, that part is brought completely offline, and because your brain gets flooded with stress hormones, and so the stress hormones focus you on fight flight reactions, and so your resourceful, your sage mind isn't in gear. So mind shifting is about teaching us to recognize the physical signals of when our reactive brain is triggered, and then to use really once we have the realization, is to use some type of a pause. It could be a simple 5-second pause to
Hmm.
just allow those stress hormones to start dissipating, so that we can start accessing the resourceful parts of the brain. That tiny gap brings the thinking brain back online, so we can
Wow.
stop having these knee-jerk reactions and start collaborating.
It is tiny, and that's what I was thinking as you were saying that, even 5 seconds can make a difference. Speaking of time, we're almost 8 minutes into this show, and we're just mentioning AI because I'm going to bring AI into the show.
Wait,
And
what? Oh, come on! Just don't tick me off now. Come on. When are you
okay,
bringing AI in? We're talking about mind shifting.
5 seconds. You need 5 seconds. Take your
Okay.
five.
All right.
Here you go. I'm going to talk about AI because the teaching methods, the traditional teaching methods, it seems like are less effective today. Obviously, AI plays a role in that. And so, if you're a teacher and you have been forced into a box, you're blamed that something isn't working, then potentially mind shifting can help there. I can't imagine that that would feel good. AI is coming in, you're forced into a box, what you were doing wasn't working, and so how can they again leverage mind shifting? But this might be more than 5 seconds.
So I think you have to look at, like, what is it that's being disrupted by AI, and what's being disrupted. I think it's become clear that virtually any student can get a better piece of work produced by AI and faster and with less effort than if they produced it themselves. And the kids aren't stupid. It's like, oh, you mean to say that if I use AI, I can get my homework done in 2 minutes, whereas if I had to do it, it would take me half an hour or an hour, and so we have this. Our whole measurement process in schools is based on the outputs that kids do. You take a test, show me the results of the test, produce an essay, we'll grade the essay, produce this work, produce diorama or a picture, and then we'll judge that. And if we're assessing kids based on their output, and they know they can do the output a lot quicker and a lot better using AI, of course they're going to be using AI, but then that's going to throw off the way we measure it. And then when they get into a situation where they can't use the AI, they haven't developed the techniques to be able to use their brain. And I think that's um, where we're getting in trouble. And I think that you know, and we can't just dump it on the teachers and say, well, okay, so teachers just forbid them from using AI, right? Or teachers develop your assessments so that they can't use AI. We need to look at it systemically.
Okay, so this is this. Well, now this makes a lot of sense why people might be angry. We've got potentially the pandemic holdover. We've got this new thing being introduced called AI, and you throw that plus life and chaos and what might be going on around the world, and you've got potential mental health crises.
Well, let's look at the other pressures. Let's look at the pressures that parents feel for for their kids to succeed. I mean, if your child doesn't get into Yale, then they're never going to be successful the rest of their life, right? That's the way a lot of parents are feeling. And it may not be Yale, it may be um, it may be Colgate College, it may be University of Texas, but it's like, if you as a teacher are giving my child lower grades, that's going to affect their ability to get into college, and if they don't get into the right college, it's going to affect their whole life. So I need my kid to get high grades. So we have that, the pressures, the pressures to show results, and then compounding that are the pressures on the superintendents and principals, because the superintendents, the principals, and the teachers, if the end of year test scores aren't high enough, then the principal comes down on the teachers, the superintendent comes down on the principal, the state comes down on the superintendents, that
Mm.
your achievement in your school isn't high enough. And so we have this pressure cooked environment where everybody's looking for a short term fix so that they don't get blamed for low test scores, high numbers of referrals, low graduation rates.
We're entering that season of testing here in DC public schools. The CAPE tests are happening, and our daughter's 11, and I keep telling her it's all good. Do your best, no worries. But even at her age, I think she's trying to figure out, are these important? Do I need to do well? And there's pressure involved in them, and maybe we're atypical parents,
Oh,
um,
you think?
especially in this area. Um, but I know that even she, as much as we try and shield her from this pressure, is feeling it. And so, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Then you've got this pressure top down, you know, you've got this from the superintendent to the principal to the teacher. Um, and when you then throw in, unfortunately, the pandemic, AI, standardized test scores, it's going to create this challenge around mental health. And what's interesting to me is that one thing that we haven't mentioned is school safety.
Right. Right.
Like,
Which is even
like
more pressure, right?
that, and that just like that the the most important thing falls down the list.
Right. For the kids to feel safe and the parents to feel that their kids are safe. Not to mention the teachers showing coming to work and being safe, right?
Yeah, I wonder. Um, I mean, there's not a day that goes by. I think that I don't think about it one way or another. I can't imagine that there's a teacher doesn't feel that one way or another. I'm not
Hmm.
sure if the kids are thinking that way. But when you put all of that together and then put on top the fact that the school safety in this country is at risk every single day,
Hmm.
that adds to more of that anger, that concern, that chaos.
Right.
So uh, again, if there are tiny fixes when it comes to mind shifting, what about a larger fix?
I think it does start with the tiny fixes, because the tiny fixes is to get into a mind frame so that we can be resourceful. And when we're in that reactive mode, our brains aren't capable of solving problems. We're in fight, flight, freeze, and that's it. So that the tiny fix comes first, is learning how, like if you're a superintendent, how do you get your team, your whole district? If you're a principal, how do you get your whole school? If you're a teacher, how do you get yourself, and how do you get your students to uh, ease up on our survival reactions so that we can be resourceful? The next part of it is, how do you get in the position where you can outlearn your obstacles? And we don't l- you know we tend not to learn from our results. We go into this blame mode because we're so sure that something is going to work. And you look at school violence as an example, and you get people on the left who are basically saying we just have to ban guns, and we get people on the right that basically say we just have to discipline people and punish
Mm.
them, and then that's going to stop it. And then, but you look at the studies that have been done, and neither one of them tends to reduce violence or school violence, but we
Mm.
don't learn because we're so busy saying, the people on the left are so busy saying, those people on the right, they couldn't care less, so they won't let me ban the guns. And the people on the left are saying, those people on the left, they're such idiots. They think that guns harm people. It's people who kill people, and so we're not learning. And so first is to get out of that fight or flight, because they're in fight mode. And second of all is to, how do we get in a position where we can start trying things out and learning them? And that's the second part of mind shifting, is getting into this out fast learning mode so that we can start doing the things that actually do solve the problems. Then the third part of it is, how do we start working with the community as a whole to move together as a whole to start solving these problems, because none of us are going to solve them individually.
And then David Shea weighing in saying, how much does social media play a role? And that's another really tough subject for at every single level, from superintendent to principal to parent to teacher to the kids.
Every single one, and they're affected slightly differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it all stems back to the way that the social media platforms have learned how our brains work, so that the social media platforms can put us into a mode where we want to do social media more and more and more, and we react more strongly and more vehemently and more angrily to uh, posts that are put in social media. And you can see it in the kids who get addicted. You can see it in the superintendents and principals who are so afraid that small thing is going to blow up and destroy their whole career. And we've seen that happen, where or just a really minor thing that somebody does just blows up in social media, and somebody, their whole career goes in shambles. So uh, social social media kind of adds to the kindling, and so that we get these huge fires that are up.
So
It's a
now we
really
know why.
interesting question, right?
Yeah. Now we know why so many people in and around schools might be angry. Um, what's good? What's
What's
good?
what's good? Well, I think the individual people left to their own devices and learning how to work together, how to learn from information rather than assess, rather than blame and judge, and learning how to get themselves into resourceful mode. When we see that happening, that's great. And we see teachers uh, and principals and superintendents who learn that, who all of a sudden it's like this happened. Okay, what can we learn from it? What's the gift behind this? What do we get a chance to practice? What can we learn from this? What can we do better next time? And when you're in that frame of mode, you're in your resourceful brain.
And then, can you give us insight into what's good also inside your cohorts? You know, like what does that look like when you have your teachers and they're learning about mind shifting and they're having these breakthroughs, and
Hmm.
what are you hearing, seeing?
So it's funny because you're saying that. I pulled together last week some of the reactions from educators, and and I actually printed them out so I can just, they're short, and I'm going to just read through, um, you know, a, what one of the teachers said. So um, here's a teacher from a high school, okay,
Okay.
and um, sh- she identified herself as having a commander personality. She admitted to being, extremely goal oriented and occasionally stomping over others' feelings. She caught herself slipping into a frustrated fight or flight mode when her boss excitedly asked to join her on a delivery route.
Mm.
She was viewing him solely as an obstacle that would slow her down. In her classroom, her students often felt overwhelmed and wanted to give up on their work. Okay, so how did mind shifting help? So by understanding how mind shifting worked, she said that she was able to shift into resourceful or sage mode. She relaxed. She stopped complaining. She ended up having great conversations with her boss instead of instead of the fight when she was on route. She also used mind shifting scripts to help a struggling student reframe their dialogue to perhaps I can work on my course, completely shifting the student's mindset to believe that they could succeed. And when asked what she most appreciated, she highlighted that the learning mind shifting was really interactive, and she really enjoyed interacting with other educators as she was learning material. So
That's good.
there's from on one side, and then if you talk about um, you know teachers who were in the, let's say, the conflict course, conflict. One teacher attempted to coach an emotionally dysregulated student through flexible mindsets. Okay, but the student's first of his decisions didn't work, and they refused to try different ones. But when the teacher started learning about mindsets and techniques that you could use to influence others, the teacher used this failed interaction as an observation for themselves. Teachers' mindset shifted to reveal that they had moved too fast, and then they successfully adapted that by realizing that they needed to to teach strategies in smaller steps to the whole class and individuals before expecting a dysregulated student to use it in the moment. So those are just a couple of examples of how teachers are educators changing with mind shifting.
So that's good. That's very good.
Yeah, it's like, so I'm doing this because I love seeing the transformation, and when I teach these classes, to have the teachers react and to say this, here's how I related to the student before. Now here's how I relate to the student, and here's the difference in how I feel about it. Here's the difference in how the student feels about it, and here's how it's affecting the whole class. It's like that's that's why you do this.
Yeah, and I think I've always thought one of the really neat things about mind shifting is, especially for a teacher,
Hmm.
all these challenges in front of them. We named a bunch of them. this isn't a pill that they have to take. This isn't, uh, another just professional development that they have to go to,
Hmm.
and that this will have a positive impact, of course, in their classroom, but also have a positive impact in their lives.
And as you're saying that, um, we're we've been providing the courses in New York and Washington for a few years. And these courses have been free to the educators in those two states. The courses are filling up, and we're offering them to 100 teachers in total. Okay, 100 educators. The courses are filling up 2 months in advance, and and an educator who takes one course. So one course will generally fulfill the PD requirements for a teacher for over a year, and then they finish the first course, and about a third of the teachers end up taking all three courses, even though they don't need the additional PD. So it's like that the people who are coming to participate in the classes, they're getting a lot out of it because they wouldn't be coming back to the other classes if they weren't. It's really cool.
Totally. I think you're when you asked me to come on this show, and I know I'm contractually obligated to be on the first one of each month, um, and I saw what we were going to talk about, I have to tell you that I'm a glass half full guy. So are you. And so to come on and talk about the realities of what is actually happening in the schools, and that people might be angry, wasn't the show I was necessarily looking forward to. But
Well, that's your tough luck because you had to be on yours, right? Right.
it is. I signed up for this, but I really love the fact that the solution is really within range for teachers, and people are signing up for it.
And I think that a next step for some of the people listening here today, or even listening to the archive, is that we're going to be offering a master class in mind shifting. It's going to be May 13th, and so let me just put the QR code because it's free. So let me put the QR code for that up here. So it's going to be a master class. And the name of the master class is going to be equipping schools to outlearn obstacles and improve outcomes. Uh, this is a registration page set up where you can reserve your spot. Um, and I'll also say that by registering, you will also get a copy of the guide, the 30-second conflict de-escalator guide. So that guide is is designed to help you and your teachers or your fellow teachers. When you're in a conflict and you feel like fighting or fleeing, it's like, okay, what do I do? And then how do I de-escalate the other person also? So it's a 30-second guide that only really takes, 30, 45 seconds in order to implement, to be able to turn conflicts from destructive conflicts into conversations that actually can end up with results that better than either side could have intended.
Well, I'm going to be there.
Thank you.
Again, contractually obligated, but I will be there for sure. I think the work that you're doing, I've always admired it. And you almost put it to me in a different way here, to understand the challenges that are going on inside and outside of those schools, and why mind shifting is so important. So
And,
thank you
and
for that.
as schools, we tend was as human beings, we tend to look at the symptom and try to solve the symptom. So we see test scores are down, so we do something about test scores. But we have to start looking at the root causes. And the root causes are the way we react to situations, the way we don't learn from situations, and we blame things we blame others, we blame ourselves, we blame the situation, and the way we don't work together as soon as we have these conflicts. And those are the things we have to learn how to do if we're going to solve these problems and stop just blaming each other and getting angry.
Hmm. Okay. Well, people have mind shifting to do it with. They've got a master class to join. And although we had some tough topics to cover today, we did. And we ended on a high note. So that's cool.
Okay. All right. See everybody hopefully next week. And thank you, Josh, for appearing, even though you had to. But thank you for coming on,
It's always my pleasure.
and thank you for not getting angry at me.
No, I'll do that offline.
Okay.